Well, hi there, and welcome back to the Business of Story. I am your intrepid host, Park Howell, and I'm so glad you're with us today. You know, this month we are celebrating, if you can believe it, our 5th anniversary of the podcast. This is episode number 262, and I just can't believe how fast the time has gone by. I've actually become known as the world's most industrious storyteller for brands, business communicators, and leaders, precisely because I seek out thought leaders from around the world to feature on this show to help you craft and tell compelling stories that sell. Plus, I'm now sharing my proven approach to business storytelling in my new book, Brand Bewitchery, which shows you how the story cycle system has grown businesses by as much as 600%, and you can do that for yourself. Here's what Drew McClellan, the founder of the Agency Management Institute, had to say about Brand Bewitchery in his recent Amazon review. And I quote, "What is great about this book is that it really is a guide. It walks you through each aspect of Park's branding philosophy with vivid examples, memorable stories, and step-by-step instructions so you can construct or tweak your brand as you read. A thought-provoking and fun read, but much more than just a book. Complete with an exclamation mark." Thanks for that, Drew. I appreciate it. So if you haven't already ordered your print or Kindle copy of Brand Bewitchery, I hope you will right now. And here's what will happen to your business when you apply my proven storytelling techniques to launch or relaunch your brand.
Falcon Heavy is configured for flight.
T-15, standby for terminal count. 10, 9, 8.
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 0. Ignition. Off. Falcon Heavy.
Seriously, man, that's what's going to happen. So, question for today's show, are you in the consulting business? Today we have Michael Zipursky, CEO of Consulting Success and coach to the consultants. He will share 4 concrete actions you can take to not only spur business growth during the COVID pandemic, but create a more robust and profitable consulting platform for the world that lies ahead. And he knows what he's talking about. Michael has advised organizations like the Financial Times, Dow Jones, RBC, and helped Panasonic launch new products into global markets. But more importantly, he's helped over 370 consultants from around the world in over 50 industries add 6 and 7 figures to their annual revenues. So what stories are you telling yourself about your own practice in today's bizarro world? He's going to show you how to reshape and reframe those stories so that you can launch your business into the stratosphere. He's also the author of 3 Amazon bestsellers, Act Now, The Elite Consulting Mind, and Consulting Success. In fact, I think even towards the end of the show, there's going to be a freebie for you where you can download his most recent book. So stick around for that. Now, are you ready? Let's put Michael's work to work for you on today's Business of Story. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, Park. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time. I love Vancouver, BC. I know that's where you're coming from. I grew up in Seattle, so I'm practically Canadian.
Pacific Northwest. There you go.
And I was watching last night on the History Channel, much to my wife's chagrin, that reality, quote unquote, TV show out now called Alone, where they put 10 survivalists on the north end of Vancouver Island to see which ones, would survive. Whoever stays there the longest without tapping out wins $500,000. And as I was watching it, a few things occurred to me. Number one, we used to go up to the north end, up to a place called Double Bay Resort, up off of Hansen Island, and go salmon fishing every summer. So I know how inhospitable that particular terrain can be. So it's fun watching it. I think I binge watched 4 episodes last night. But what occurred to me is that these survivalists out there, 2 of them tapped out the very first night. They couldn't handle the creepiness, I guess, of the rainforest up there and the cougars and the bears and whatnot. but I thought it was also a great metaphor for the times that we are in today as consultants, trying to navigate our way through the wilderness of COVID, the coronavirus, Black Lives Matter, the economic peril that we're all in. And so the timing of this show and your new book that just came out, Act Now, is perfect for our listeners. So I'm just so glad you've taken the time to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm a fan of what you're doing and glad to be part of it.
Have you seen that show by chance? Alone?
I've watched an episode or two of that, but it must be at least 2 or 3 years ago, maybe when it first came out. I don't actually have cable television and haven't watched too many programs recently, but I do remember that, and it was interesting.
Yeah, it was that. My wife was like, "How can you watch that?" And I go, "I don't know. It's just grown men crying out in the wilderness is kind of fun to watch." So Michael's CEO of Consulting Success, and you have now, in like record time, created this new book to get people through or help them, offer some navigation through what we are dealing with. Before we get to that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory and how did you get into the consulting business in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started my first consulting business between high school and university with my cousin and business partner, Sam, who to this day remains my cousin and my business partner. And we've built and sold multiple businesses together over the years. At the early stage, that first business, it was a web design and development company, and Sam was doing all the design and the kind of creative side, and I was really managing more of the business and the client communications. And so that one business, got us working with lots of different types of companies in different industries. And not long after that, we decided to create another business, this time really focusing much more on brand and visual and marketing. And so that was a really fun experience. And around the same time, I actually ended up going over to Japan. And so I ended up opening up a branch office for our business over there. And we had the opportunity to work with companies like Panasonic and Dow Jones and the Financial Times Japan and Sumitomo and Omron and a whole bunch of other multi-billion-dollar organizations, helping them to get their products and their messaging into North American markets, or at least English-speaking markets, more effectively.
So is that like pretty much straightforward branding, web development, digital marketing type firm?
Yes. So it started off where a lot of what we were doing was on the visual side. So whether it be websites, brochures, marketing materials, logos, naming, things of that nature. But pretty quickly, and I guess when I say quickly, I mean it was over a period of years, but I think I became frustrated with the focus just being on visual. And the reason for that is that it can be quite subjective. And I remember sitting down at a boardroom talking to a Japanese president of an organization, and we spent 3 hours with multiple people in this room talking about whether they like this color or that color and this shape or that shape. And I was just thinking to myself, like, this is important stuff, but really, like, what matters is this going to move the needle? Is this going to increase your sales? Is it going to help you to penetrate the market? And so I started at that time to think more and more deeply, and I was studying about direct marketing and direct response marketing. And really where I ended up shifting more to is that everyone can have their own opinions, but at the end of the day, sometimes something that you think looks really good actually performs worse than something that doesn't look as good and performs much better. So the next consultancy that I started was really focused on kind of direct response marketing and lead generation for professional services companies, which were investment firms and other consulting firms and insurance brokerages, law firms, and so forth.
And Michael, did you find that was just more tangible, a tangible offering? I mean, all of us in the brand marketing business, design business, whatever, because it is so subjective, it sometimes feels like you're selling ether, versus tires for your car or something really tangible. Was that move you made to offer a more tangible approach to sales and marketing?
It was, and it may have been partly due to for kind of like my own benefit and sanity, but I think I probably moved in kind of opposites at that time. So we started off very visual, and then I ended up thinking, no, I don't. This is too subjective. This is too much art. I want to get more into the science. Really want to start to see and understand and study what is driving response. And so I shunned design to a degree. Over time, I mean, the fast forward, that was now 18. I've been building consulting business for the last 20 years. So, almost 2 decades ago. And really now what I've realized over the last many years is that it's the fine balance between those two things. Design, branding, the visuals have immense power. They can really help you to see greater results in business. And so you don't want to neglect those things. But at the same time, there's a lot of nice looking websites out there that don't do anything, that don't generate any leads, don't get any response. And so, what you say, how you say it, and focusing on actually eliciting a response, while at the same time making sure that you're conveying the right professional image. I think when those two things come together, that's when you have a winning formula.
So in the lead up to this show, when I was doing the research and some of the information you all sent, you had said in there that you admittedly were not a very good storyteller, or maybe didn't really appreciate how story worked. How were you getting your business without it? And when did you have that aha moment that you had to become, it's becoming an overused term now, but it's, I guess, because it's so important to be more vulnerable and to communicate your trials and tribulations, maybe even more so than your great successes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go way back here, but I was born in Toronto at the age of 2. My parents moved us to Israel. And so I spent 4.5 or so years there until, I guess about 6.5 living in Israel. And then my parents moved us back to Canada, but this time to Vancouver. So when I came back at 6.5, 7 years old, I really felt like an outsider, and I didn't speak the language. I didn't know anyone, and I felt like I had to prove myself. And the way that I did that was through sports. So everything in my upbringing from about 6.5 or 7 years old till probably about 15, 16 was like every single day was sports. And I was very, very competitive. And that kind of leads to why I never really want to express vulnerabilities. I always thought you had to put your best foot forward, but also don't show your weaknesses, because, that's how your enemy can attack. And I was always used to being very competitive. So that mindset was ingrained into me from a very young age. And then as I started to kind of move into more academics and going to college and university and then into business in those early years. And I think also part of what played into this is that I was in Japan at a pretty young age doing business with some very large organizations. So when I was in my early 20s, I was consulting for multi-billion-dollar organizations. And I'm happy to share about kind of how that all came about. But I was the youngest person in the room by far. I was often hanging out with people who were in their late 40s, 50s, 60s, and here I was in my early 20s.
So I got to ask you that right now. How did that come about? I want to get that out of the way. I'm curious.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to jump around. So I'll try and add as much value for people here as possible as well. But so I've always been interested in Asia. Growing up in the Middle East, I've had a love of cultures and people and languages and all that kind of stuff. And when I came to Vancouver, for anyone that knows Vancouver, there's a lot of Asians in Vancouver. And so when I was in high school, I felt like I was the one white guy in a sea of lockers, and everyone else around me was from different places in Asia. And so at that time, Japan was also the number one economy in Asia. And so I was studying Japanese, I was learning about business. And so I just had this love of kind of Japanese culture and martial arts that I was studying and all that kind of stuff. And so I decided I was going to go to Japan. And I also had this business with Sam on the side at that time as I was going through high school. And so I was making the transition from high school into university. And so I was going to go to Japan and I didn't know anyone there. And I thought, I'm going to find companies that we could potentially work with or partner with. And so I went in and online and I found this English database, because at that point my Japanese was not very good. And I found this database of a bunch of Japanese graphic design and architecture firms. And I just sent off emails to probably 25 or 30 of them. I only got 2 responses. And when I was in Japan, I met both of those people that responded. And it just so happened that one of them, we really clicked. And it was just like meant to be. And, we set the next meeting and we had a next great meeting. And then he started introducing me to other people. And that led to those people introducing me to different people. And it was all, as they say in Japanese, the word kankei, which is actually our business was called kankei culture. Kankei stands for relationship. And so our whole, culture was about relationships. We believe this was so important in business. And really in Japan at that time, the way that I was able to get into boardrooms and to sit down with some very large organizations and well-known people was through the relationships that I had built and just trying to add as much value as I could for every person that I did meet.
And so was it just a sense of timing that you happened to be in the right place at the right time, made the right relationships that now got you into these major boardrooms?
That's one way to look at it, but I would say it was more the actions that I took that that made this a success. I could have been in the right place, but if I hadn't sent those emails, or if I didn't think to do research online to find all those different people, I put the work in. And I think that's a big theme throughout everything that I've done in life. It's once I'm clear on what the goal is that I want to achieve, then I'll put the work in to get it done. And that work doesn't scare me. I don't mind working hard to achieve something, but it was going through those series of steps and just being consistent and making sure that I was going to get the result that I wanted. And it played out well.
And when did you find storytelling and how you could grow your company around that?
Yes, let's go back to that, right? So for the early years, I really felt that I needed to put on my game face, and I should always be focused on winning and showing myself as the most professional person. What I realized over time, and probably in the last several years, was that as I started interviewing for our own podcast other successful consultants and reading and just talking to different people, I realized that a lot of people were being much more vulnerable and open than I was. And I wondered about that. And I realized that in those conversations where you are actually most vulnerable or most open, those are actually the most valuable conversations. Those are when you're vulnerable with someone, or when you just tell them, you share your story, they let their guard down, right? They become comfortable. When I really thought about this, all of the people that I'm close with, what makes me close to them is that I can be open with them, that we can just have that conversation where we can just share our vulnerabilities and share our stories. And I thought, well, why not apply that to business? Why not apply that to the community that I'm working here so hard to serve and to create value for? And so we also worked with some mentors in that area that opened our eyes to seeing, sharing your story is really powerful. And so we started to take steps to do that. And I got to be really honest, Park, that it wasn't the easiest thing to do, especially, after having kind of that opposite mindset ingrained in me for so many years. But as we took steps to be more open and to share more of the vulnerabilities and tell more of our story, and not just only shine light on things that were working well, but also to talk about things that weren't, or some of the challenges that we had gone through, or in our personal lives, or whatever it might be, we started seeing that it actually attracted more of the right kind of person that really resonated with that message.
Do you recall that time, that moment when you saw a story at play and you realized that somebody else was doing it well and you had to kind of wake up to it and start doing it?
It's been now several years, so I can't remember one specific moment that started it all, but I can tell you that I remember I interviewed someone for our podcast called the Consulting Success Podcast, and he told me about his story, that he was an alcoholic, he was a drug user, he almost committed suicide. He just opened up to a degree that I never would have imagined. I just couldn't feel comfortable with that initially. And I actually asked him, I said, I hope you don't mind, but why are you sharing all this with me? And he started telling me about it, and the impact that it had on him, and how that then allowed him to connect with others who were also maybe in a similar place, or just to have more impact. And I said, well, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how has this also impacted your business? And he said, oh, it's been amazing, because so he started kind of, sharing with me and opening my eyes to how this can not only be better for your brand and for connecting with people, but it can actually have a really positive impact on your business as well. And so as we started to kind of put these different pieces together, it just made a lot more sense. And now looking back, I go, wow, should have done more of that even earlier on. But I don't like to look back necessarily in hindsight and go, should have, could have, would have. It's just, that was a really good lesson that now we have continued to implement and share with our clients as well, because it certainly has worked.
Can you share a story with us that you share with lots of people when you are telling the consulting success story? Something that really reveals that vulnerability in you that maybe before you were kind of shy about telling?
Yeah, so I actually started off when you and I are talking about that I've already told you about, this idea of me feeling like an outsider. We went through, so one of our mentors that we worked with, Park, he kind of suggested, and he showed us an example of someone who had documented their story and developed a video, almost like a mini documentary around it. And Sam and I were in this meeting, and we thought to ourselves, wow, we should do that as well. And so we embarked on that journey where we worked with like a screenwriter and a videographer, and we put together this video. And so if you go to our About page on on consultingsuccess.com, you can see the video that we created. But it was part of that process, or during that process, that I realized a lot of things about myself that I hadn't really thought about before. And one of those was that the way that I am, that competitive nature, or the way that I look at the world, or the affection that I have for learning about different people from different places and all that kind of stuff, comes from my early years. And I never really thought about the reason why when I came back to Canada, that it was the feeling that I was like an outsider that made it that I had to prove myself, and that I would look at maybe certain things that I would feel a little bit more sensitive around. And I realized it's because I have this kind of internal struggle within me that is always trying to be a little bit more ahead, or to accomplish a little bit more, because I was the outsider and I had to prove myself. I didn't have the language, I didn't have the network, I didn't have the friends. And so I always had to try and do something to prove myself, to show like, hey, I can be here too, and include me in this. And so in those early years, it was sports. Later on, then it was trying to work hard in business and in school and so forth. But that was something that I never would have shared with people early on, because to me, it seems like, why would you talk about that? It's, that's kind of a negative, or it's talking about how you weren't always in the place where maybe people thought that you were. But that was one story that came from that whole process that now I share a lot, because I think it really is fundamental to who I am today.
And as I understand it, listening to your story here, it sounds like Consulting Success, your firm now, was built at the intersection of what you learned growing up, and this sense of not belonging, and helping people to belong now, consultants to their clients and so forth, and your experience that you and Sam had in building out your digital marketing firms. So you're bringing those together to help consultants now connect with these audiences and not feel like the outsider, but become the insider with their customers. Yeah,
you're very right on that. I mean, we started our first consulting business about 20 years ago, and then 11 years ago from today, or not necessarily today exactly, but around 11 years ago, we started Consulting Success, and we did it just as a place to share information. I was writing articles, trying to help people to learn and to apply what was working for us, but also sharing some stories of what wasn't working as well for us, so that they could avoid some of those missteps. But I think what you said is actually very true, that deep down inside for me, I always, where I get the greatest joy is helping people. And so I think you've said it very well, but yeah, we really work with consultants day in, day out to help them to achieve higher levels of success and more freedom and have more impact. So that, they can, they don't have to be the outsiders, because the reality is that consulting can be quite a lonely path to take, right? You're often by yourself or just with a small firm, and you have lots of questions. You don't necessarily have all the answers. And so through creating the community that we have, we hope to provide, and it's really what we've been doing, is to help people to navigate through those kind of choppy waters.
And so now you've written 3 Amazon bestseller books. You have The Elite Consulting Mind and Consulting Success. You just, it sounds like at a breakneck pace, turned around your most recent book, Act Now, How Successful Consultants Thrive During Chaos and Uncertainty. So the timing couldn't be better, of course. Number one, I guess I don't even have to ask how you came up with the idea for this book. It's all around us. But how were you able to turn it around so quickly? And then, of course, let's dive into the meat of this book and share some of the insights for us.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Some people have asked, were you planning this beforehand? And no, it was March 2020, right? And a lot was going on, and we were seeing just the uncertainty in the marketplace with many of our clients and those in the community. And I've always believed that the best way to lead is through demonstration. And I thought, well, what better way than to help people by not only just sharing my own opinions and ideas, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to ask other thought leaders, friends, successful consultants, what are they doing in their businesses right now? How are they handling and navigating the current situation? Because the goal is, and as kind of the title or subtitle says, it's not only about how to manage and kind of survive what's going on, but really how to set yourself up to succeed and to thrive. And so it was very much a team, kind of approach to this, but we came together and interviewed 6 thought leaders in the space, people like Perry Marshall and Rita McGrath, Martin Lindstrom, a whole bunch of others. And we took those interviews and used that to kind of share what were they doing and what are they doing right now, and also what have we been doing at our company, and walk people through some very specific examples, which I'm happy to get into as well here. But a big belief that I have in business is imperfect action, not to wait for things to be just perfect. And so we could have waited, and we could have thought of ways to make this better, or wait for the perfect timing. But it just seemed that the sooner that we get this book out, the sooner they can have an impact on people. And it's actually why even to this day you can still get a version of the book for free, because we just wanted it to get into the hands of as many consultants as possible, so that they could take action, so that they could not just kind of wait for things to get better, but they could actually start implementing some ideas and principles and strategies that would help them to not only get through this time, but to really succeed. And it's because we've seen it before, right? We've been through other challenging times in the economy or with health scares, and of course this time is unique. But things will go up and down, and during times like this, the seeds that you plant today will really provide you with wonderful fruits of your labors and dividends into the future, as long as you take those actions today. So that was really kind of the rallying call behind Act Now.
From the interviews you had with your thought leaders and your own experience, what you're seeing with your own clients, what is the number one thing that is holding people back right now during these tumultuous times?
I mean, it's fear and uncertainty. People, when you don't know what's going to happen, when you're unsure, when you're getting beaten down by the media, and things are changing so rapidly, and there's so many different voices, and there's so many extremes, a lot of people get scared by that. They don't know what to do. They tell themselves stories and make excuses, which are understandable. I am empathetic to what's going on, and I personally know people who have been affected by this, or have even lost family members and loved ones during this time. But with all of that going on, it's very easy to create an excuse to say, well, I don't know what to do, or nobody's buying right now, so I should wait, or I don't want to contact people because I don't want to say the wrong thing. That you can create all these different reasons not to take action, but that is actually the worst thing you can possibly do.
So this fear and uncertainty are actually giving us permission to not do those hard things that we have to do day in and day out, no matter what kind of economy we're in, right? But it's like, well, no one's buying, so I'm going to hang out and watch Alone on TV. I mean, it's an excuse not to do stuff.
Yeah, well, it's okay for you to watch Alone on TV as long as you're not doing that, all day, every day, right? We're allowed to enjoy ourselves for a little bit of time every day, for sure. But yeah, I mean that's it. And the interesting thing is that these same kind of excuses or challenges or fears or anxieties that come up during this time, I mean, these happen regardless of whether or not there's a pandemic or not. And I think that's actually been the consistent mindset of success that I saw across all 6 people that I interviewed, and many others that I've spoken to since then, and even before, that you need to treat these times and take action during these times as you would if you weren't in these times. And again, you need to be empathetic to what's going on, and you probably are going to be changing some of your messages and approaches, and you have to be flexible. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we can get into as well, but you don't wait, you don't stop, you don't try and get the timing right. You need to keep going because that's what's going to put you in a much better place, where while so many people are waiting and trying to get things just right, or they have their heads kind of in the sand waiting for things to pass, that you're planting those seeds. And so when things do return to quote unquote normal, or things get considerably better, you're going to be far further ahead of those that didn't take action during that time.
I was talking to a leadership coach friend of mine, Dr. Kevin Gazzara, the other day, and he said something that really struck me. And he does a lot of coaching all over the place. A lot of his worldwide travel has been, cut short, as all of ours has. But he says the one thing that he talks to his people about is regret. And to say, don't regret what you're going through now down the road that you didn't take action. don't regret that you let the fear and the uncertainty overcome you, and you weren't planting the seeds and you weren't building in a time when it seems like nobody's calling and no sales are coming in and you feel like a loser basically, and that it's out of your control and you can't do anything. He said, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of regret when we come out of the other side, because he sees far too many people not taking action, just like you were saying. So what can they do? What are some of the actionable steps in your new book, Act Now, that people can take to start getting themselves out of these doldrums and back into the game?
Yeah, great question. So first one, very high level. Every day, each one of us gets to make the same decision, and it's whether we're going to whether you wear glasses or not, you get to kind of put on your glasses and either view life and view what's in front of you through either a negative lens, where everything that, the first thing that you look for is what's wrong with the situation and why won't this work? Or you can put on the positive lens where you go, okay, maybe there's some challenges here, but where's the opportunity? What's good here? And that one choice will influence how you act or whether you don't act, and how you deal with everything that comes at you for the rest of that day and into future days. And so to start off, we all get to make that choice. It doesn't matter what our positions are, where we're from, what our backgrounds are. We can either be positive and always look for what's positive, or we can be negative and look for what's not there. And I would say that if you want to succeed, then you need to put on those positive lenses every single day. The second thing then...
Can I stop you right there real quick? Because I think it's a great point. We are hardwired with a negativity bias. So we are going to grow up. We're going to wake up in survival mode, and it's going to start from a negative place quite often. It's like, okay, what do I have to do to survive this day today, regardless if it's COVID or my business or whatever? Any suggestions on how to make that shift from those negative goggles to the positive ones as you're getting up and getting after your day? And the second part of that is, can you share an example of, maybe it's a client of yours or something you've seen in the world where somebody has really reframed what's going on in our life right now, and they're out there in service to their customers and they're gaining because of it?
Yeah. So the first part of that, I would say, is I'll share what I do personally, which is I'm not a big news and media guy. I think that the news pounds you with negativity over and over again, to the point where even if you don't necessarily agree with what they're saying, you end up believing it because it's just what you hear over and over. I mean, that's the power of the media. So number one, stop watching the news. You're not going to really learn anything that's going to help you tremendously in life. Number two, wake up with gratitude, or go to sleep with gratitude, but ideally maybe even do both, which is just take for a moment and think, what can I be grateful for right now? When I was speaking to clients early on, kind of in the midst of let's say March time, with everything happening in the world, what I said, and I believe I wrote this in the book as well, that, even with the challenges that we all have right now, the vast majority of us are still far better off today than hundreds of millions of people are in the best of times. Most of us still have running water. We have electricity. We have a bed. We have warm blankets. We have access to food, to water, and so forth. A lot of people don't have that even in the best of times. So that's just one example of how you can either view and go, oh, I don't have this and I can't reach my customer, and say, well, sure, but you have electricity. You have hopefully loved ones around you. You have access to food. You have opportunities. You have choice. A lot of people don't have that. So by focusing on what's positive, being grateful for something, that's a really great way to shift your mindset from focusing on what's missing or what's wrong or what you don't have, to seeing that, you're actually probably a lot better off than you think that you are. In terms of a very specific example, I mean, we have so many clients that are wonderful examples of this. Many have been in a position where some of their clients have dropped off, or they've had to pause things, or it's just a time of challenge, but they haven't stopped. They've continued to find ways to add value and serve their clients, and that has then allowed them to see some of their clients continue to develop and to create higher levels of success. So I would really say the best examples of this are so many of the clients that we work with, who day in, day out, even though they're facing challenges like the rest of us, they're continuing to take action, to find ways to plant seeds, to find ways to create value, to serve, to make an impact, knowing that their current actions today may not give them the result that they want, in the next day or even the next week or even the next month. But when you have a long-term mindset, then success doesn't have to be instant. You know that you're going to, reap the benefits and the rewards of it down the road. And when you reframe and start shifting from short-term to long-term, then playing this game becomes a lot more enjoyable.
Do you have an example of someone that has done that really well? And you don't have to share their name necessarily, you're welcome to, but someone that's reframed their business.
Sure. I mean, a client and friend, Elliot, Began has done this really well. He's showing up and running like Q&As and webinar interview sessions with leaders in his industry, which is the emerging food and beverage industry. And he's done this, very consistently. He's created a lot more office hours for his clients in his portfolios. He's interviewed different thought leaders. And so really what he's just, continued to do, and he was doing this before, but even stepping up to a whole new level during this time, is finding ways to be more present, to add more value. And through that, even though certain people may not necessarily become clients of his today, he knows that he's creating value for them. And so if it's the right person down the road, right, they will be. And even if they don't, he's not doing it from the perspective or from the intention necessarily just winning new clients. He's doing it because he knows that it adds value for the overall community. And that's what it's all about. During what's happening right now, more than ever, we need to find ways to come together and support each other, because that's how we'll all get through this and be better off.
Sweat equity now has been never more important. So it sounds like this guy, Elliot, is doing this, maybe not seeing a return immediately, but he's being present. Like you said, he's adding tremendous amount of value, and he's building his connections. He's building his community who will not forget him once things start coming back and think, you know what, Elliot was there for me in the worst of times. Let's bring him in to help us with such and such.
That's 100% right. I mean, if you think about what's happening in the kind of the ecosystem right now, because there's fewer people there's a lot of people, right, who just have their heads in the sand, which means that right now it's easier for you to get your message out there. So whether you're someone that uses paid advertisements or not, I mean, the paid advertising channels are a great kind of illustration of this, that in March and April, many organizations decide to stop their ads, right? They decide to cut costs. Well, the smart marketer said, okay, well, great. Now I get, a lower cost per impression or a lower cost per click. And so, yes, I may not have as many people that are able to necessarily buy or make decisions right now, but I can get much greater distribution, much more visibility at a lower cost. Well, I'm going to plant those seeds, right? And so now they become the most visible in their marketplaces. And so that's how they then start to capitalize and gain greater market share. And so even if you apply this to a directly kind of business environment, there's so many opportunities to do this. And so if you are the type of person that really wants to build for the long term, the more actions that you take today, the more ways you find to provide value to the market that you want to serve, again, in any industry, I think the better off you're going to be going forward.
Yeah. All right. That's number one. What was your next one before I interrupted?
Oh, good. So yeah, we've been talking about it here, but it's really about adding more value for your existing clients. And so, what I was doing in March and in April was calling clients. And not calling them to say, hey, do you want to buy something, or can we upsell you this or that? It wasn't about transactions. It was about, hey, hey Sam, how are you doing? Hey Jill, how's it going? How are your kids? How's your family doing? That's it. Like, it was just to check in and to be present, to let them know that I'm there for them. And this is an opportunity that every single one of us has to get in touch with those that you care about, those in your community, your clients, your past clients, even prospective clients, but especially with those you already have a relationship with, and not lead from a sales perspective, but rather just lead from a place of service. Let them know that you're there for them, you care about them. If there's anything you can do to help, they should let you know. That's number one. Then the next part of this is to be flexible. Right, going into situations like this, you have to know that what you were offering before isn't necessarily going to be what you need to be offering today. So when we talk about from a pricing perspective, you may have had your previous pricing, let's just say it was $10,000, right? Well, now you might want to be thinking about not only having a $5,000 option, but maybe you also need to have a $50,000 option, because some people during these times are not going to be able to make the same level of investment. Even if they have the money, maybe they just don't have the same level of confidence, or they can't get the buy-in, or they can't make the decision as quickly. So you want to have a more flexible, potentially lower priced option for them. But other people will need actually more help given what's going on right now. I mean, a lot of people think, Park, that because of what's happening right now, that people aren't making business decisions or they're not buying. Well, they are. And the problems that people had before, they still have those problems today. They might be different problems, but they still have problems. And most likely, they actually have more problems today than they did before. So don't back off. Don't wait for the dust to settle. The people that you are trying to add value for and serve need you today more than they ever needed you before. But they can't call upon you, and they likely won't call upon you if they don't see that you're visible. So get in front of those people, have conversations, find ways to provide value. And then when the timing is right, let them know that, you have a few different ways that you might be able to support them. Here's what that looks like. And so don't just stick rigidly with, my offer is $10,000 or whatever that number is. Also think about what can you do at a lower price point, and as well, what can you do at a higher price point.
I love the line, even a frozen turkey can fly in a tornado. So you think about that when it relates to business. And what you're talking about here is such common sense, and it's what we all should be doing all of the time, but we don't. When business is really booming, we have our heads down and we're just selling, and we're working, we're delivering and so forth. I think maybe we forget and back out of that gratitude mindset because you're just so busy, reaping the rewards of your hard work. The flexibility all of a sudden doesn't seem to come into play as much because you got so much work, you don't have to be flexible sometimes. And adding that value, of course, that's always at the heart of every good business. So what you're talking about just seems like it's now more amplified than ever, but they're sort of the core of running a business in any time, good times or bad, aren't they?
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I mean, I think what this time has given to us all, if we embrace it, is perspective. It's kind of resetting some things and looking at what are our priorities, and what do we need to maybe be doing that we've been neglecting for some time. But adding value and serving should be at the core of every service provider and every business owner.
All right, so let's take a worst case scenario, Michael. You have someone that shows up and they're so beaten down, and a lot of people feel this way. And I got to admit, I feel this way from time to time. You have worked so hard to build the business. The rug has been pulled out from underneath us. You're flailing around. You're trying to show up with gratitude and value and flexibility and, put as much content out there as possible. But you just they come knocking on your door and say, Michael, I can't do it anymore. I am so exhausted. I'm so worn out. I'm not even sure anybody wants what I have to offer anymore. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would just try and empathize with them and realize that they're likely in a very tough situation. The other part, though, is that it depends on what their situation is. I mean, there are some people and some businesses and industries right now that have been getting hit very hard and probably for a while will be. And so certain people, the best thing that they might need to actually look at is stopping their business, right? They might need to get out of it and kind of cut that line before it drags them under even further. But if they're not in that position, I mean, if they're let's say a consultant that has an opportunity to grow and they've just been in a slump and they're finding that people aren't buying, then I'd really want to dig a little bit deeper to look at what are they currently doing? What kind of communications are they putting out there? Are they making calls to action? Are they extending opportunities? Are they inviting the right people to, for example, certain types of little webinars or small group workshops? There's a lot of things that people can do. And oftentimes it's not about reinventing the wheel or bolting on something completely new. It's about taking an existing asset or an existing approach and just tweaking it slightly so you can see better results from it. As one quick example, we had a client who was sending out a newsletter and following kind of all the best practices that quote unquote gurus were telling that he should in terms of just create content and send newsletters and good things will happen. Well, 18 months in, he was doing that and he was generating no leads at all. And we just kind of, analyzed what he was sending out and found that he wasn't including a very compelling call to action in his newsletters. And that's why no one was responding. And so he made that one tweak. And every time he sends out a newsletter, he gets 5 to 7 people responding saying, hey, this is really interesting. I'd like to talk with you. Well, that completely changed his business. So there's opportunities like that for many of us. And sometimes an outside perspective or just looking at things a little bit differently can create the kind of improvement that can be quite exponential. But it's a great question, Park. And I think really without, knowing that specific person's situation, it would be hard for me to give advice that might not seem general. But I do think, just to be very clear, that there are certain people in certain situations where they actually do need to look at making some very drastic shifts, just because of, certain things are different compared to before. But for, I think, many of us, there are opportunities. As long as we're creative, we can transition, we can shift, we can adjust, we can improve upon what we've done to see better results than we're currently seeing.
And how often, when you're working with a customer during this time, a consultant out there, that they come in and they are doing 4 or 5 or 6 different things, and they're not really getting any conversion out of that? Do you look at boiling it down to do one thing and one thing well, whether that is a newsletter or a blog or a podcast or whatever? Or how do you kind of help them rein in, their hair on fire? I am doing everything I possibly can to get through this thing and nothing is working. How do you help them find that focus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we reverse the pipeline. What I mean by that is, for all consultants, right, you're going to generate a sale or win an engagement after having a conversation, submitting a proposal. And so if you look at the deal pipeline, right, from left to right, you're typically going to have lead. This is just high level, right? You could have many more columns than this, but essentially you're going to have lead, conversation, proposal, win, loss. And so the first thing that we want to do is just look at, okay, well, what's your current win rate? Because if you're sending a lot of proposals, but you're not, you have a very low win rate, then that's low hanging fruit. Let's just figure out how to optimize your proposal process and your sales conversation so that you start winning more proposals and figure out what's going on there. If someone, for example, has no leads, well, then you have a lead problem. If they have a lot of leads, but they're not getting those leads to have a meaningful conversation, then there's something missing in that call to action or in the messaging. If they're having quite a few conversations, but those conversations aren't moving to the proposal stage, then there's also something happening in that sales conversation in terms of how they're talking about or not talking about their offer, or questions they're likely not asking. So we would just want to analyze and break down each of these different kind of columns or sections. And by diagnosing with that approach, we can relatively quickly figure out where they should be focused, whether that's on more lead generation, more on sales conversations, more on offers, more on proposals. And that's where we would then begin and work backwards from there.
Great. Okay, and then last question, Michael, what is the one thing every listener should do right now at the end of this show?
Take action, whatever that means for you. And so as an example, one action that you could take that likely would benefit you is make a list of all the people that are in your ecosystem. These might be current clients, past clients, prospective clients, vendors, people that can either become clients or people that can refer you to your ideal clients, and just pick up the phone and call them. I said pick up the phone and call them, not just email them. The phone is a really powerful tool if you choose to use it. And I'm constantly surprised or I should say people are constantly surprised when they take that action, they pick up the phone, they call people, just how those conversations can move forward. If you do it from a genuine place to check in, just to add value, to see how people are doing, it'll be really well appreciated. Even if you don't reach that person, then leave them a voicemail, send them a quick little follow-up email. But doing that can often unlock new opportunities that you're currently not able to grasp. And the second thing that I would suggest that people do is, if you want to dive deeper into the principles and the strategies and the ideas that we've been talking about here today, Park, you can get a free copy of the Act Now book by going to consultingsuccess.com/act now. That's ACTNOW, all one word. So consultingsuccess.com/act now, and you'll get a free copy of the book right there.
Well, Michael, thank you. You are a breath of fresh air during these times. I got to tell you, I love the energy. I love the advice that you've given here, and I am going to go and get my Act Now right now. So thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Park, really appreciate it. Thank you for everything that you're doing. It's really, I know, valued by so many people. So keep it up, and thanks again for having me.
I appreciate that. And I'd like to thank all of you listening to today's show. If you liked what you heard, what Michael had to share, and you know a consultant out there or your colleague out there that could benefit by this wisdom, please, by all means, share this episode with them and send them to, let me look at that, consultingsuccess.com/act now to get your free book. Just out, how long ago did this book come out? Like just last week, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, this came out in, I believe it was end of March or beginning of April. Yeah. So it's now been out for a couple months, but it's still very timely given what's going on now. And I believe it'll still be timely for, going forward, because there's always different levels of uncertainty and chaos that is coming up. And so it's written not just to be a COVID related book. It's really written for anyone in professional services or anyone in business that feels like they're dealing with chaos at times, which I think we all are.
Yeah, that's for sure. And of course, if I can be of service to you, visit me over at businessofstory.com. I've got my new book out, and I'm going to have to talk to Michael after this show about how to become an Amazon #1 bestseller. I'm doing my best right now to do that. Just launched it a couple weeks ago. It's on Amazon, both print and Kindle. And of course, I know a new author's best friend next to their readers are rating and reviews. Please feel free to leave one there. Also, as you are acting now and really trying to dial in your brand story around your consultancy company or you're working with clients, also check out my online course at Thinkific. It's businessofstory.thinkific.com. It is the perfect complement to brand bewitchery. When you pull those two together, it'll help you clarify your story and teach you storytelling skills and proven narrative frameworks that you can use to share your new story with the world. Thanks so much for listening. Join us next week when we will have another story artist right here like Michael. And until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.